how you can get a 5 on the AP Psychology exam. This is Mentor Mike, and today we're going through the steps that I took to get an A in the class and a 5 on the AP Psych exam. First things first, I know a lot of you are taking this as your first AP exam because you've probably heard that it's really easy. And while that might be true for it being an AP class, you should keep in mind that this is still a college level class, so you cannot be falling asleep because you will not go very far. And I would highly recommend taking notes and following along with everything your teacher says. Now, onto the rest of the video. So I'm assuming that your teacher is going to give you vocab sheets and practice tests for each of the units in class, which is what my teacher did, and those are, I believe, the two best ways to study and prepare for every unit test and for the final exam. However, if your teacher doesn't give you that, I would highly recommend getting this Princeton Review AP Psychology book or going online, and I know that Barron's has a lot of review sheets, and you can certainly find practice tests online as well, but you need to do a lot of those in order to have a good grasp of all the material and feel confident for the exam. Now, if you go on the vocab sheet and you see there's a word you don't understand, just Google it. These are all pretty easy concepts as far as the scientific field is concerned, so you shouldn't have a problem finding a definition or finding who one of the people who you need to know are. So here's how you're going to actually study. So you're going to have a list of all these terms here, and for each word, you're going to read it, and then you're going to explain out loud as if you were explaining to someone else what the definition of that word is. So for example, you have the word decay here, and after you read that, you're going to say, well, decay is when you lose memory over time because you forget stuff. Alright, and you do that for every single term, and chances are it's going to stick around in your brain. Once you're done with that for every unit, you're going to go here to the quizzes. They have drills here in the Princeton Review, but it's the same thing. And you're going to answer all these questions and see which ones you get right. That's the material you know. If you get any wrong, well, that means you don't know the material, so you need to go back and reread whatever terms you missed and do the process again where you try to explain it out loud to somebody. I know that some people use flashcards in order to memorize this, but I personally don't think that's really the best way to memorize these because the definitions are kind of complicated, so it's not like learning another language where you just have a word on the front and a word on the back. You would have a whole definition on the back. So I feel it would be easier to just have the definition somewhere on another sheet of paper, and you're just trying to rephrase what this term means in your own words every time you say it. This class has several concepts that require you to know a lot of different parts or different things from one category. For example, the psychological perspectives, the parts of the brain, and the stages of development, and the memory techniques. Since all those are related, you may find a question sometimes that's like, oh, list 5 perspectives on psychology and say how they apply to this situation. Right? So you need to study a little bit differently for this. Instead of looking at the key term like before and then just saying what that is, you can start off with it, but I would recommend having a chart basically that has, what the perspective's called, who invented it, and what it does, and just based off that, you try to memorize the chart, but like all of it at once, so you can go line by line at first, but then what you need to do is put the whole chart away and try to repeat out loud everything that you understood from that chart. And if you do it correctly, that means you got that concept down. So now let's talk about the actual exam. The first part is the multiple choice section, which is mostly just defining vocab or basically defining vocab, but you have to just apply it to a situation. Generally, the applying part is actually really easy. The part they really want to test you is whether you actually know the material or not. It's not a lot of time though, so you do need to go through the questions pretty quickly. However, if you know the material, you should be fine. And for people who are taking this for the first time, there are going to be a couple questions which you just never covered in the course because just that's how they make AP exams. It's pretty much almost impossible to get a perfect 100%. However, it is very possible to get a 5. So now we're going to go through the FRQs. There are 2 of them, and you have 50 minutes to solve that part of the exam. And the first one is going to be applying concepts to a certain situation and maybe even defining them. And the second one is going to focus on research design. So for the first FRQ, if you remember how before I listed a bunch of concepts that kind of come together, like parts of the brain or perspectives of psychology, so that is most likely going to come up on the first FRQ. The question might be, for example, here's a situation, how would different perspectives view what has just happened? Or what parts of the brain were responsible for this occurring with this person? So as long as you listened to the part before where I said to just memorize the charts, basically, you should be fine for this part. And for the second FRQ, the research design one, that one is pretty straightforward usually. And you just have to look at a graph or just like look at results of an experiment or try to design an experiment yourself to, for example, test out if a new medication works or not. And basically, you just need to know some very minimal statistical knowledge, which I'm assuming your teacher is going to teach you. And if you know that, you're going to do fine. Now, how you actually write these FRQs is actually pretty straightforward. They're going to ask you the question. Usually it's going to be like a whole paragraph of a prompt. And then there's going to be 7 vocab words. And you're going to need to write the vocab word and define and apply it. Sometimes you don't have to define it, so make sure to look at the question and see what it's asking. But usually it's that format. However many words there are, that's how many sentences your answer is going to be, and it's just how each word applies to the situation. It's not really an essay, it's more just written answers. And that applies for both the first and the second one. Now, usually they are going to throw in 1 or 2 words in each of the FRQs that you probably did not cover, and that's just too bad. You have to make your best guess as to how that applies, and maybe a strategy you could use is just try to be as vague as possible to hopefully capture, multiple definitions potentially, but generally you're just going to have to answer what you know correctly, and what you don't know, you just don't know. Yeah, so when you're done studying for the AP exam, all I would just recommend you do is take a practice exam to see how well you're going to do. So either you can take one from this book or from any of the other prep books, or I'm sure there's plenty of free exams you can take online. And then just go on albert.io, put in the grading scale, see what you got. And if it's a 5, well, you're done. Good job. Yeah, and that's all the tips and strategies I have for AP Psychology. If you have any other tips, well, please comment them below, or if you have any questions, also comment those. And subscribe, because I'll be posting more videos just like this.